We've been going through a series called unCommon. And what we've been trying to help communicate or trying to communicate in this process is the difference between the life that everyone sees day in and day out, which is very common, it's very natural, no big effort, it's just what you normally see, and the life of a follower of Christ. And what's the difference? And should there be a difference? And if so, how? And when we get to today's topic, we're going to be talking about this idea of uncommon respect. And I think it's something that we all see every single day, just about. You see it when you watch couples communicate. You see it between employees and employers. You see it with people that are in authority, people that are under authority. Sometimes you see it with fathers and their children, children with their fathers. And the one thing that stands out above all these things are these two words: no respect. And some of you, when you hear that, you may process that a little differently, but I think many times it troubles us because we see a lack of respect at school, for the teachers, for those in administration, for the students. We see a lack of respect for employees, for those in authority, for customers. And many times it really bothers us deep in our core because we say, man, doesn't anyone have any respect anymore? And sometimes in the office, we may see something like this. Watch this brief video. Now, hopefully tomorrow, when some of you go to work or school, you don't experience that. But I think that's a reality. Obviously, this is a comedy, and they're trying to help us laugh a little bit. But I think we would find this is more common than not. And the question becomes, well, what is respect? When you say, am I respecting someone in a way that is uncommon? Unlike the traditional everyday thing that I see on TV or the news or at my place of work, what is respect? Well, let me help you define it. The word respect, it comes from the late Middle English Latin word respectus, and it means attention. So first of all, it means attention. You're giving someone your attention. It's a consideration that you're giving them. It says respect can be summarized to mean the value one places on another person. It involves recognizing people for who they are by demonstrating acceptance, appreciation, and great value. Now notice those words: attention, value, and who they are. And notice the three at the end: acceptance, appreciation, and great value. So today what we want to do is take a look at respect, uncommon respect, in the way it relates to husbands and wives, children and their parents, parents and children, those that are in authority, those that are under authority. And hopefully when we walk away here this afternoon, there's one thing that we can do to make a difference in this area. Let me give you a little bit of background. During the time that Paul was writing Ephesians, and we're going to look at today Ephesians chapter 5 and some of Ephesians chapter 6, but there were some things that were happening that were very, very unique, and then other things that were very, very common even today. And here's what was happening. During this time, the Jews, and the Jewish men in particular, they had a low view of women. They had a very low view of women. We're going to talk about what that means in just a minute. But to the Jewish man, when you would say the word woman, different things would come into his mind. It says here, for an example, in the morning prayer, there was a sentence in which a Jewish man gave thanks that God had not made him a Gentile, that's basically a non-Jew, a slave, or a woman. So can you imagine being next to a Jewish man and he's praying this and you're a woman? How would that make you feel? Not very uplifting, right? You know, I'm thankful that I'm not a man or a woman or a slave or a Gentile. That was one of the things they would do. Why? Well, simply because there was a low view of women. Look at the second thing here. It says in Jewish law, a woman was not even considered a person, but a thing. She was absolutely the possession of her husband. And what we're going to see here is in this culture, different things were happening at the same time. And people would take things that were meant for good, twisted them, and turned them into something that basically gave a lack of respect, in this case, to women during that time. Now, what we find here is the woman, in particular the wife, she had no rights of divorce at all unless her husband became a leper, an apostate, or engaged in a disgusting or an immoral trade. In other words, the husband had all of his rights. If he wanted to divorce his wife for any reason at any time in the day, all he had to do was go see his rabbi, ask him for a piece of paper, a certificate of divorce, give it to his wife, which basically said, I now release you to go out and marry again. But the wife couldn't do that to her husband. But all he had to do was easy divorce 101. Here's the paper, take it, find somebody else, have a nice life without me. So that was the culture, that was the environment during that time. So the process of divorce was disastrously easy. Easy. And many times when people come and they come to church or they've kind of exhausted everything else and they come and sometimes they'll sit in my office or in Russell's office and what they try to do is convince us that there's a good reason why they should leave their spouse. They often leave very disappointed. Because the common view of marriage and the uncommon view of marriage, according to the Bible, are completely different. You see, the Bible looks at marriage as a union between one man and one woman under God forever until God himself decides to separate them. What does that mean? You and I are not in the process of separation. That's God's job. And what God wants is for a husband and a wife to live in union, submitted to the lordship of Christ, until he decides to take one of them home. So during this time, there was this view that was just totally out the window. And what was happening was this: the young ladies stopped getting married. Guess why? They didn't want to be left to the curb. They didn't want for their husband to one day to just say, here's your certificate, keep going. So this started producing in their culture some serious issues. And I think if you and I were completely honest, a lot of that stuff is happening today. Irreconcilable difference. Let's get a divorce. We've had this issue. We had this problem. Let's go and get a divorce. Instead of saying, what does God want for our marriage? What does God really want from us? Instead of what do I want? What do I need? So what we find is during this time, it was very common. It was very common to treat women with zero dignity. It was very common to divorce for the men, for whatever reason, to divorce their spouse. It was very common for young ladies to not get married simply because they were afraid of what their husband might do or how he might later on divorce them. And all of a sudden, something changed. All of a sudden, something entered culture that completely restored the dignity to the woman, marriage where it needed to be, and now things, instead of being common, now became uncommon. And that was Jesus Christ. When he entered into our world physically, he began to change one person at a time, one heart at a time, what was common to uncommon. Look here in your notes, the early church. And after Christ ascended, what we find is that the early church had an incredible impact. Now, if you don't think the church's impact was that huge, let me help you understand something. During this time, there were people who were very influential, and they wrote certain things about women and about culture. Let me read you some of those things. Demosthenes, one of the leaders, he wrote, "We have our ladies for the sake of pleasure. We have concubines for the sake of daily cohabitation. We have wives for the purpose of having children legitimately. And we have a faithful guardian for all of our household affairs." So during this time, adultery was very, very common. Prostitution was an essential part of life, and adultery was very common. Now, let me ask you this. In our world today, is there prostitution? Yeah. Is adultery very common? Yes. So unfortunately, we haven't, no matter how many more people we have that are educated, or how much we've done on the internet, or how many things we've invented, society is not getting better, it's getting worse. And the lack of respect that we see for parents, for children, for students, for teachers, for people in authority is not decreasing, it's increasing. It's increasing. So when the church stepped in, after Christ ascended, he left the church began to make a big difference. It says here in your notes, the early church was a church where men honored and respected each other and other women. Paul says that the reason for this mutual honor and respect was that they reverenced Christ. They saw each other not in the light of their professions or social standing, but in the light of Christ, and therefore they saw the what? The dignity of every man and every woman. So here's what happens, and some of us can relate to this really, really well. Some of us, before we came to know Christ as our Savior, we used people. We used people. We saw their body as an object for momentary pleasure. And we used people. We saw people as objects to profit on. And we used them to swindle them, to take money, to take advantage. Some of us, before we came to know Christ, had a thwarted view of people. But then Christ came into the picture, and all of a sudden, as I've heard it said, I can't do what I used to do anymore. I can't steal from that person like I used to steal anymore. I can't curse out that person like I used to anymore. I just can't do it anymore because I just don't have the desire. God is doing something in my life. So these desires that were once very common, very open for everyone to see, and just the consequences were terrible, all of a sudden, Jesus Christ steps in and he begins to change them from the inside out. So this morning, let's take a look at first what's common and uncommon between husbands and wives. Let's start there. Husbands and wives. And for this, we're going to take a look at Ephesians chapter 5. It'll be up here on the screen. Ephesians chapter 5 in the English Standard Version. Paul says, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. In the New King James, it says, submitting to one another in the fear of God. Verse 22, wives. Let me see, how many wives do we have? Raise your hand with a smile, ladies. A smile. Wives, raise your hand with a smile. All right. Wives, submit to your own husbands. How many husbands do we have here? All right. They're a little slower in raising their hands. Come on. There you go. All right. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its what? Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything, or submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's deep. That he might sanctify her, in other words, set her apart, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any other such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Here's the big therefore. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. What is common today? Husbands and wives. What is common? Divorce? Common or uncommon? Common. Adultery? Common or uncommon? Common. Lying? Common or uncommon? It's common. And unforgiveness in a marriage, is that common or uncommon? That's very common. So these things don't surprise us. Sometimes on a daily basis, we hear about a couple, sometimes we know them, sometimes we don't, who there's been unfaithfulness, adultery, severe lying, and complete unforgiveness. You know what the sad part is? We hear it so much that sometimes it doesn't bother us like it should. Because we hear it so much that after a while, yep, cheated on his spouse, yep, had another bank account they never knew about, yep, they said they've been working, they haven't worked in 2 years, yep, they said they forgave him, they haven't forgiven him. That stuff should bother us. It should really bother us, but you know what happens? It even happens to pastors. We hear it so much, it's like, okay. This is common. There's nothing spiritual about not forgiving someone. There's nothing spiritual about lying. There's nothing spiritual about walking and looking at somebody longer than you need to. There's nothing spiritual about that. That's common. Everyone can do that. So what's uncommon? It says, the key to uncommon respect in a marriage relationship is mutual submission. Mutual submission. Marcel, in my home, I am the man. I am the big papa of the house. That's the way it's always been. That's why you're so miserable. It's not one-sided. No, it's mutual submission. Have you ever seen synchronized swimming in the Olympics? There's no, I'm better than you, you're better than me. They have to be on the same page to win the gold. They have to be in tune, paying attention, watching one another, listening for the music, and they have to be synchronized in order to be effective. What makes you and I think we can have this hierarchy in our marriage and be successful? What Paul is talking about is not the hierarchy of marriage. He's talking more about the function of marriage. The husband should function as the leader in the home, but he doesn't always function as the leader. Screaming loud doesn't make you a leader. Threats don't make you a leader. Loving service and modeling what Christ did for his church makes you a leader. Sometimes I hear guys say, but they've got to respect me. No, they don't. You've got to earn the respect. Talking about people on the street, well, they need to respect me. No one needs to respect you. You have to earn your respect. Now, here, Paul tells the wife, you have to respect your husband. Marcel, that's not easy. I know. We're difficult. I look at Yami sometimes and I say, I know it's not easy being married to me. She smiles. It's not easy to respect and honor. But you have to do it. It's not easy to love and cherish and make sacrifices for her. But you got to do it. The husband leads the relationship, notice, through sacrificial, loving service to his wife. When was the last time you did something for your wife that cost you something? When was the last time you promised your wife to take her somewhere and all of a sudden they changed the playoff schedules on you again? When was the last time you did something for your spouse that cost you something? Baby, you can have anything you want under $9.99. When was the last time you purposefully and deliberately and intentionally, and all those great synonyms, did something for her that had no personal benefit for you? Honey, will you massage me tonight? Oh yeah, baby, I will. Without part B, oh man. When was the last time you did something just because you love them? Just because you value them? Look at part 2. It says, he, talking about the husband, deliberately and regularly takes steps to demonstrate and express love, value, appreciation, and provision for his wife. What do you do when you first walk through the door of your home? I sit down and get a cup of coffee and watch TV. Wrong answer. I check the stats on ESPN. Wrong answer. You should plant a big, juicy kiss on your wife. If you slobber, that's okay. But the first thing you should do is plant a big one on your wife and hold her tight. And I know your kids, probably like mine, ew, it's disgusting. They're on this side of the fence. Wait till they get on the other side of the fence, as Andy Stanley says. But listen, you have to show her, you have to tell her just how much you value her as a person. Marcel, I never saw my parents do that. That's okay. You can start a new tradition. It's not enough to just say, I love you. You have to demonstrate it. It's not enough to just say, thanks, babe. You've got to do something else. You have to do something uncommon. Now, the question has to be asked, well, how can I practice this uncommon respect with my wife? I find it very interesting. The last part of this verse says that a husband will leave. You know the challenge that many guys in this generation have? They want to get married, stay at home with mom and dad, and say, this is marriage. That's not marriage. If you can't financially support your fiance, you have no business getting married. If you don't leave your parents' home, you will not grow in your marriage. It says the husband has to leave. He's got to go. So what does that mean? Well, you mean I'm not going to be home till I'm 40? No, I hope you're not home till you're 40. You mean that addition that they made is not for me and my wife? No, it's not for you and your wife. That's rental income from someone else. But listen, I've seen couples dramatically change their marriage simply by moving out. It's amazing what happens when guys can hang around the house in their SpongeBob underwears. It's amazing. And just relax, and it's just, husband and wife and no one else. You know what happens at that moment? You work things out without any additional input. I'm not saying you never go for advice. I'm not saying you never go to ask. But at that moment, you've got to work it out. So if you're planning on getting married and you've got this great plan and you've been painting the room in the back of your parents' house, paint it for somebody else. Because if you don't leave, you cannot cleave. If you don't leave, you will never experience what God had intended for you to experience. The next thing, maybe your wife is waiting for a spiritual commitment. Well, Marcel, I'm saved. I accepted Christ as my Savior. That's great. Are you faithful in church? Well, during dolphin season, I don't always make it. 3 out of 4 Sundays. But maybe what your wife is asking or hasn't asked is, I wish he would take the leadership role in the spiritual things. That's not her job. That's our job. Or maybe she's waiting for you to accept who you are. And one of the things I find that wives can do really, really well is they can encourage their husbands to be more than they think they can be. They can actually help their husband advance in their career, advance in ministry or different things by simply believing in them and encouraging them along the way. Everyone else is making fun of men. That shouldn't happen, wives, at home. That's the place that they should be encouraged the most. It says here, the wife creates an environment of honor and respect in the relationship by following the leadership of her husband. By following the leadership of her husband. That statement assumes, men, that there is leadership. It has to be more than, this is what I feel we should do. There has to be something deeper than that. The second part is, the wife, as we said, regularly contributes to the relationship and encourages her husband to grow in his role as the leader of their marriage. How many of you, when your kids were small, or maybe your kids are small, husband and wife, you talked to each other and you got to the point where you said, what are we doing? This is so different than, anything we've read, and you start working together, and the wife helps her husband to be a better parent. The husband helps his wife to be a better parent because this is new. You're figuring all these things out. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, wives have such a critical role to play when it comes to this uncommon respect. Take for an example tomorrow. Let's say you've been working at a job, ladies, for 10 years. And for whatever reason, because of your husband's schedule, he has never been able to meet you at the office. And then all of a sudden, he walks in and they say, hey, do you know who this is? This is so-and-so's husband. What's going to happen when your group of friends from work see your husband? Are they going to say, oh, you're her husband. We've heard a lot about you. We've been praying for you. That anger issue, Jesus will set you free. Or will they say, man, we've heard so many things about you. I've told my husbands, you should do some things that he does for his wife because, man, he's just this teddy bear and he's just always sending her notes. And when they text each other, XOXO and all this stuff. And why don't you do that? And, they try to spend time together and they make plans. And when they're together, they're not fighting. They actually enjoy their time together. you know, it's nice to meet you. Would you like to meet my husband too? What would they say? What would they say? Ladies, if you don't respect your husband publicly, you'll never respect him privately. If you don't respect your husband at home, you will never respect him outside the home. It's not going to happen. You have to determine to honor him, even if it hurts. Because that's the uncommon thing to do. Men, you have to determine to love your wife in such a way that it reminds people of what Christ has done for the church. She nags a lot, I know. What's the alternative? Oh, but the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And statistically, that's a bad move. What we often forget is many times our selfishness is the reason we have issues in our marriage. It's usually something in here that God is still working on. Let's talk about the kids, children. Ephesians 6, 1, 2, and 3. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a what? Promise. That it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. This is a fascinating verse. What's common? Children to parents. Lying, rebellion, self-centeredness, and no respect. Yami had told me the story of a child in Westland Mall that was just throwing a fit, and the lady was trying to cast out demons in the mall. And we talked, and she's like, that lady needed a belt to cast out those demons. But what happens when you see a child disrespect a parent? What happens when you see someone disrespect a grandparent? I hope it bothers you. I'll never forget when I was in a physical therapy volunteer program. I was doing some hours there, and the therapist basically would receive people who had total knee replacement, total hip replacements, and all these things. And for the most part, these were elderly folks that would come. And these people, I was so impressed because these therapists were so gentle. Because these people had just had a, hip replacement, sometimes double hip replacement. They had these large wounds, and they would put them in these tubs, and they would do all of these things to help them feel at ease. You know what they were doing? They were honoring the elderly. Can I ask you a question? Do you honor your parents? I'm not asking if you obey your parents. Do you honor your parents? Do you value them for the role that God has given them in your life? Are you quick to just respond anytime they say anything because you don't like it and you think you have better things to do? Or are you really, really honoring them? Sometimes we honor teachers more than we honor our parents. Sometimes we honor others more than we honor our parents. Here's a question for you this week. Mom, Dad, is there something that you need this week or today that I can help you with? Is there something going on at work or at home or things around the house? Is there something that I can help you with? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I know exactly what they're going to say. Just put that to the side. Honor them. What can I do today, this week, to help you? Don't say, I want to do something this week, but the playoffs just ended and we have this other game coming up, so there's certain hours that I am not available. Don't do that. What can I do to help you this week? If your parents are very elderly, or maybe your parents are in another state, when was the last time you called them? Marcel, but every time I call them, they have something negative to say. Okay. You still have to honor them. Every time I call them, they tell me how stupid I am, or how I didn't do this, or I married the wrong girl, or I married the wrong guy. I understand. You still have to honor them. I'm amazed of how many people refuse to talk to their parents and think they're honoring God. If there's anything I've learned as a pastor, is that life is short after doing so many funerals. Honor your parents while they're still around. Show them that you respect them. Help them to see how much you value them. Let's talk to the fathers. Ephesians 4:4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Don't provoke them to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. I'll read it again. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. What's common? What's common with fathers? What are some of the complaints that we hear? My dad's always yelling. He screams all the time. He's always threatening. I'm going to kick you out the house. I'm going to send you to live with your Uncle Billy. I'm going to do something. Big threats. Manipulating. He's tricking me. He's not being honest. He's lying. Criticizing. I can't do anything right. Everything I do is wrong. What's uncommon? Well, it says, the key to uncommon respect in this relationship with your children is to be a godly and consistent person in the way that you teach, correct, and encourage them. Marcel, are you saying that I don't discipline my children? No, I'm not saying that at all. My dad used to break a branch from the tree and whip me. Yours might get a belt. Whatever you got to do is fine. I prefer belts over trees any day. But however you discipline biblically, discipline. But don't park and stay there and never leave. Because sometimes all we do is discipline. And we forget to love and encourage. It says here, the challenge that we have is not to control, manipulate, or criticize their every move, but encourage them in their potential and God's continued work in their lives. Can I ask you a question? Wherever your child is right now, in 10 or 20 years, where do you see God taking them? Well, I see my child that I think they could be an incredible engineer. And I could see them one day running, something big like a Super Bowl because they just love technology and they're really good with gadgets. Great. Have you ever told them that? Well, my daughter is so talented in dance and she trains so hard and she would be an incredible dance teacher. Excellent. Have you ever told her that? My son is so detailed. I mean, he could probably be an incredible chemist or, a programmer, learn all these programming languages, and he could probably invent the next $1 million app. That's great. Have you told him that? What happens sometimes is we focus so much on what they're doing or what they're not doing right now that we forget God has a plan. God is doing something in their life. And many times they can't see it. And you and I as the parent, we have to help them see, listen, I see this. Now, you're going to need to work hard. You're going to need to study. You're going to need to look for scholarships. You're going to need to do all this. But listen, if you focus, I can see this become a reality. What are we saying? Sometimes what we need to do with our children is not just critique their every move. It's give them a vision for what can be in the future. And you know your child better than anyone else. And if you really focus on their personality, their gifts, their talents, their sleeping schedule, you can probably see and envision where God might take them in the future. But if your sole focus is, you made your bed and I can't bounce a quarter off it, and all these other things that sometimes mean absolutely nothing, you're going to discourage your child. And you're going to miss an opportunity to instill a vision in their heart for what could be. Children, you have to respect your parents. Dads, you have to give vision to your kids. You know, my son and I, we mess around a lot, wrestling and different things. And when he was younger, we would wrestle more and I would win. And as he got older, you know, we would wrestle and kind of hand fight and mess around. And the other day we were messing around and I started it. And it just took him one punch to take me out of commission. So we were at the beach yesterday and we're playing football. And I'm like, trying to throw the ball because I can't throw it past 10 or 15 yards. And you know, it reminds me of when they were little. And you start seeing things even now at 19 and 16. And you have to ask this question, Lord, am I doing my part to help you do your part? Or am I trying to so mold them into the person that I want them to be, that I'm discouraging them from who you created them to be? Am I giving them the support to be all that you have designed for them? Or am I trying to manipulate and control and create opportunities and close opportunities simply because I want them to do this? Dads, don't provoke them to anger. It says here, employees, or people in authority, rather, and people under authority. Ephesians 4. Bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart as you would Christ, not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will, as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or free. Masters, talking about those in authority, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. What's common in the workplace today? What's common in many offices and many warehouses today? They're right here. Threatening, cheating, lying, self-preservation. If I can cheat and get ahead, I'll do it. If I can threaten and maintain power, I'll do it. If I can do this and preserve my job, I'll do it. If I can lie and no one else find out, I will do it. That is common. Very common. So what's uncommon? Well, it says the key to uncommon respect in the workplace is to remember that you are working by the grace of God, for the purposes of God, to point people to the living God. By the grace of God, for the purposes of God, to point people to the living God. Why do you go to work every day? My wife makes me. Okay, I understand. But why do you work? What is your mission in going to work? Yes, we have to provide for our family. But there's a bigger mission than just collecting a check. God has you in a company or an organization for a specific purpose. You may be there a couple of months, you may be there a year, you may be there 17 years, you may be there a lifetime. There's a reason why you are there. And so many times when I talk to people, one of the reasons why they're so miserable at work is simply because they've looked at work through the wrong lens. It's a job as opposed to a ministry. It's a place I go to make money as opposed to it's a place I go to serve and honor and be a light so that somehow, some way, someone may come to know Christ. It says here, doing this uncommon thing means doing your work wholeheartedly with integrity. Doing it from the heart. There is nothing worse on a Monday morning than a miserable fellow employee. How was your weekend? It was horrible. Great. How was last weekend? It was just the same. How is your time in the office? It's miserable. I can't wait till Friday. I hope you're not working with someone like that. I hope you are not that person. Marcel, are we supposed to be happy and cheery and go lucky all the time? No, that's not what we're saying. But there should be an attitude of gratitude in your appearance, in the way that you speak. Have you ever been in a job that you really, really, really did not like? And you asked the question, Lord, what sin have I done to be placed here? Sometimes you've done nothing at all. And I remember one day when I was working for this company, when I stopped and I thought about all of the guys that I worked with, I realized none of these guys are in church. None of them. I was the only one out of a whole lineup of men. None of them. None of them. Some of you can relate. And I would say as long as God has you there, and until He shows you clearly it's time to go, be the light, be uncommon in that place. The second thing, go beyond the call of duty, even when no one is watching. Marcel, it's Friday afternoon, it's 4:59, and at 5 o'clock exactly, I'm gone. And if they need my help, I will be back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. on the dot. Love that attitude. That's going to get you real far. It doesn't. There are times that you may need to do extra things that are not in the job description. Can I help you out as somebody who helps people write job descriptions? You never do only what's in the job description, okay? So when you take a job and you have a job description, that consider it as a skeleton of some of the things that you're going to do, and they're going to add some skin and meat and muscle. But as they add things, have the right attitude. As they add things, seek to do your best. And number 3, take the initiative to make your place of work better. Better. Do something uncommon. If someone is celebrating a birthday, help them celebrate. If your team has reached a milestone, celebrate the milestone. Don't be the team drag. Be the team cheerleader. It says, As an employee, or maybe you're a student or a volunteer, work for Christ and serve those who are in authority over you. Russell was telling me that he went to a graduation and 50% of the students in that graduation made straight A's, had a 4.0 average. I've never even heard of that. And that doesn't come because you're cute. That doesn't come because you're the best at Call of Duty. That comes from what? Hard work, a lot of prayer, a lot of commitment. If you're going to be a student in college, in high school, in junior high, be the best that you can be. I was never a straight A student until I got to college. And if I was honest with my parents, I didn't really put the effort in. And I learned something that, whether I like the school, whether I don't, whether I like the teacher or I don't, we should strive to do our best. It says here, as someone in a position of authority. Now, this could be a manager, this could be a supervisor, this can be an owner of a company or a leader in an organization. Serve the people you lead from a pure heart. From a pure heart. One of the most dangerous things when you are in a level of leadership, first line level, second line level, executive level, whatever, is that you have more power to do good, but you also have more power to do wrong. It's amazing what happens when you get promoted to lead teacher, lead supervisor, lead manager, whatever it is, and now people report to you. It's amazing what you can do for good, and it's amazing what people do not for good. Sometimes people say to me, Marcel, I don't want to go into management because all managers are crooks. How would you know? How do you know if God is not setting something up for you to have greater influence at your job? It says, develop the people on your team and refuse to use intimidating tactics. Refuse to use intimidating tactics. Before you close your bulletin, I want you to look at it for just a minute. We have husbands and wives, children, parents or fathers, people in authority, and those under authority. And sometimes when we're getting close to the end of the message, I know we're already thinking about what's on the grill at Chili's and all this stuff, but I want you to stop for a minute. And I want you to ask yourself this question. In one of these areas, what's the one thing that you should change starting today? If you're a husband, if you're a wife, what's the one thing that you should start changing as of today? What's the one thing you should do differently? What's the one thing that you should stop making excuses over and just do it? With your parents, what's the one thing that you should start doing today to honor them? What's the one thing? It might be, you know what? They've cooked for you all their life. You've never bought them a meal. You've never done anything without griping and complaining. And today, that's going to stop. What's the one thing? Fathers, what's the one thing that you can do starting today to cast vision in the life of your kids and stop dumping on them your frustrations? And then if you're in authority, or if You report to people who are in authority. What's the one thing that you can do today to make a difference? To be uncommon. To be someone that people would say, man, that person, they're just different. It's not that they're weird, they're just different. And they're being a great example, and maybe I should ask them why. I hope your life is not common. If it's common, I can guarantee one thing. Your impact in eternity will be very, very little. The uncommon life is the life that in eternity you're going to see so much more. But here, you're going to experience so much more that truly is better. Let's pray this morning.